Today on the All Kinds Weather Forecast, we go game by game, predicting all 12 matchups for the Florida Gators as we preview the 2024 season. This is the All Kinds of Weather Forecast. And welcome in to another episode of the All Kinds of Weather Forecast. I am your host, Chris James, alongside my co-host, Neil Schulman, here in the heart of Gator Nation. It is game week. Finally is here. The matchup against the Miami Hurricanes, the 19th ranked team in the country, come to the Swamp to kick off at 3:30 on ABC. But before we get to all that, please make sure if you're watching on YouTube that you're subscribed down below. Make sure to hit that like button. Leave a comment of what you think the record will be for the Florida Gators this season as we are predicting each game of the season. Neil, this is exciting. I mean, I know it's been kind of a weird off season for a lot of Gator fans. The unknown of Billy Napier's tenure, the unknown of playing what it's going to look like eight ranked teams this season, potentially, maybe not eight, now that Florida State has lost their opener up in Ireland. But you know what? Regardless, it's going to be a tough schedule, but there's just a sense of excitement. It's like Christmas or Hanukkah on this Saturday. I mean, that's the least the way I feel.
Happy season, y'all. Happy football season. We're there. I mean, we're recording this literally minutes after Aiden Burr for Georgia Tech kicked the game-winning field goal to beat FSU. There's football now that we could say is in the past tense in the 2024 college football season. Like we're here. We're in it. It's so exciting. And we're not here to rub it into the Knowles, though. We do have 12 games of our own to talk about, but there's just something magical about college football, even beyond the Gators. Like you and I are both Florida Gators fans. We're also just generally fans of the sport of college football. And
Amen.
that's back as well as Gator football. Like there's two separate subsets of happiness here. And that's because the game of college football and the Gator football season are finally upon us.
Yeah, and another thing I thought of is that I guess even though, yes, we have a tougher schedule this year, and you see this conference realignment that's resulting in these mega conferences, and that is very polarizing of an opinion. At the very least, because of that, we're going to have absolute cinema now on Saturdays. I mean,
Oh
some of the
yeah.
matchups we're going to preview this season here on this show, in the same week, you're going to have some of the same types of matchups in conference, top 25 matchups. It's going to be great. And hopefully the Gators, if they do crack the top 25, are going to get those headlines of those big cinema games that we're talking about. So,
They get a
Neil,
chance right away, don't they?
absolutely. So let's jump right into it. First game of the season this Saturday, 3:30 on ABC. The Florida Gators take on the Miami Hurricanes. Now, there's something a little bit different. I want to clarify. In our preview show with Ali Peak, we gave our percentages chance that we thought the Gators had to win the game. Now, percentage does not equal necessarily if we think they're going to win or lose. Obviously, over 50%, we're pretty much implying that we think the Gators are going to win, but that doesn't mean they're going to win. And especially anything in that range of like 40 to 60%, essentially we're saying it's a toss up. Like it could go either way. It's really when you get above 75% that we're saying like we feel very strongly the Gators are going to win the game. And I don't know if there's even more than half the schedule that we said that for. So Miami was one of those games where we all basically put it in that toss up column. I think we were anywhere between 55 and maybe 62% if I remember correctly. So Neil, the Florida Gators, the Miami Hurricanes. We're going to preview this show this week as well and give a lot more in depth. So I guess we're kind of spoiling who we think is going to win the game, but we're not going to give our score predictions for this game. Who wins this game and why?
I'm a bit worried about Ruben Bain for Miami. I think that's the one guy that if you're going to pinpoint anyone that can just completely wreck your game plan on either side of the ball, it's him. If Florida can stop him, I would say that I would take my chances up to about 80, 85%. But because we don't know that, obviously, that's why I was in the 60s, I think. I think Florida allows him to make plays, but I think the Gators do make enough plays of their own around the game-wrecking plays that Bain is going to make. So I think Florida wins simply because they need it more, because Miami can afford this loss and they literally just have to win out and they're going to the CFP, which is a lot easier for them to say than for Florida because, as we know, we only heard about 714 different times. Florida has one of the hardest schedules, not only this year, but in recent memory. So Florida needs this. They're in the swamp. We saw the 247 Sports Talent composite ratings come out. It is by a very slight margin, but the Gators on paper do have the more talented team. I'm going to go with Florida.
Yeah, I like it. I'm going to go with Florida as well. And as Neil mentioned, the 247 talent composite did come up. The Gators rose from 15th to 12th, and they are ahead of both Big Three Florida schools, Miami and Florida State, respectively. And I think it is 12, 13, and 14
It
in that
is.
order.
It
So, I
is.
mean, those teams are very, very close on paper when you really look at the talent composite. But I agree. This is going to be a close game. And I'm not naive to say that Miami is going to have their big plays in this game. They're going to have their big plays in this game. They're going to hit them. Cam Ward can be an electric player. You know, you've got guys like Neil mentioned, Ruben Bain, Josiah Trader, along with many others that we'll preview later this week. But I think that the difference in this game is the swamp. The Gators in the last 10 years have won over 50% of their games when they were an underdog by a touchdown or less. We saw that last season against Tennessee. I think this game could play out very similar to the Tennessee game, whereas that Florida is going to have to pound the rock a little bit to establish the run, to open up that pass. Miami's got a very good defensive line. I think it is one of the best defensive lines in the state between the two big three, the big three schools. So Florida's going to have their work cut out for them there, and we've said it time and time again. The right side of the Florida offensive line is maybe the most problematic spot on the entire team. So how can they hold up against that Miami pass rush? Can they give Graham Mertz time to step back and to hit those big throws to a receiving core that we think is the best in the last 10 years, or at least since that 2019 team when we boasted guys like Josh Hammond, Freddie
Yeah, I was gonna
Swain,
say that that's a
Trey
little
Grimes. Yeah,
that's
I
a
mean,
little much for
Kadarius
me there.
Toney. Yeah, I mean, so maybe as I say that last 5 years. So for the last 5 years, that's still a really high mark to put out there that we have that talent, but it's not going to matter if we can't protect Mertz. But I do think ultimately the difference in this game is the crowd, and I also think the defense is going to get stops on third down. They're going to get off the field finally. We're going to see a better Gator defense that's fired up to play, and they got something to prove after what happened last season. So I'm going to predict the Gators win a close game. We'll give our score predictions later this week, so make sure you're continuing to follow along here on our YouTube channel.
Before we move on to the next game, I just want to point out real quick the constant between those three receiving cores that you just talked about. This year's, the one 5 years ago, the one in 2008, 2009. Billy Gonzalez, wide receiver coach for all three of them. Shout out
Absolutely.
Billy G. We see you. We appreciate
Yeah.
you.
Great coach. Great coach, X's and O's, and getting guys talently developed and into the league. So very, very good coach there. Happy to have him back. Samford, next game. This is either a get right game or this is a feel good game after beating Miami. Samford is not a team that we should mess around with. We should win this game handily. I think we both are predicting that. And I also think we hope that it's not going to take a 70 burger to get the job done like it did back in 2021. Neil, I don't really think there's a whole lot more to say about this game. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but this is just a game where maybe, and I'm going to say this, maybe we see a lot of DJ Lagway. If you get up in the second half, you get those backups in, you get those freshmen in. There are a lot of talented freshmen that have come in the 2024 class, and this is an opportunity to give this some early play time in the season. DJ Lagway as such.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to note too is that the Samford team that put 52 on us and all those yards on us, that team isn't there anymore. You know, Liam Welch, the quarterback, gone.
And
Montreal
neither is that
Washington.
2021 Gator team.
Well, that's an obvious one. Although we do
Yeah,
still have Derek Wingo from that team, and I think
right.
as we talked to him earlier in the offseason, we're going to see a very different version of him than we saw in that game. But I mean, Montreal Washington, the guy that took the kickback and had all those big runs, he's gone. Their defense is obviously completely reloaded. It's a much weaker Samford team than what we saw 3 years ago, and they weren't that great 3 years ago to begin with. But they're expected to be pretty mid at best this year. So Florida, I think if you don't win this game by 25, 30 points or so, there's a major cause for concern.
I agree.
DJ Lagway point, obviously agree with that. You'd love to not see Merch play a full game, get him some rest for Texas A&M. I think Florida does handle business in this one.
And it's in the game, and I know the news came out. Montreal Johnson Jr. is practicing again. We'll see if he goes for Miami. If he doesn't go for Miami, you could probably hold him another week so he's fully healthy for that A&M game for him
Right.
to come back. So we'll go ahead and get into the A&M game now. The Gators take on who is the preseason ranked 20th ranked team in the country. And I got to say, Neil, I think this is weird for me because I know Texas A&M has recruited well over the last several cycles. but that team got gutted. This is not the same Texas A&M team that Jimbo Fisher recruited. That was that number one class. A lot of those guys have since moved on. Those guys like Walter Nolan, Evan Stewart, they're not there anymore. This is a
Haynes
new
King to
squad.
Georgia Tech.
Ains King to Georgia Tech, who just beat the Florida State Seminoles. We'll keep digging that one all show long, but I'm not. I think if you basically put the blind taste test on and you looked at these two squads on paper, Florida has more returning production and experience than Texas A&M does, and that to me should be an advantage in this game. Now, as we talked about in our preview with Ali, ESPN FPI has this as a 50-50 game, and we also still said we thought it was a kind of a 50-50 game. How ultimately, Neil, do you think the Gators though get the job done in the SEC opener?
Am I allowed to say that a game is a coin flip, or do I have to pick a winner?
This show, I'm gonna hold you to it. I think we've established it's a coin flip. It can go either way,
I
but
know, but so I have
feet to the fire,
there's
you gotta pick one.
there's this game, and then there's another game later on in the season that I think Florida is about a literal coin flip chance to win. This one I'll say they win only because of what we talked about with Allie and Chris Phillips on that show. The Gators do get this team early. I think if Florida played this game in November, they'd lose. I think if Florida played Texas A&M at home next year, they have to go to them on the road. But I think if Florida even got the Aggies at home next year, I think Florida would lose unless, you know, the Gators really do start showing their hype to be reality on the field at some point under Billy Napier. But I think Florida is lucky that they get A&M when they do. I don't think A&M is much of a threat in the first few games of the season compared to what they're going to be down the road. Again, worth noting, they do have some of Florida's, I don't want to call them rejects because Jaden Hill was pretty good. He did make a lot of plays for us, but they do have some guys that went on from Florida. I don't know that that's going to help them quite as much as their fans might like to think, but I think Florida just has a better team, and that's going to show in the first month of the season.
And perhaps a change of scenery can be good for guys. We've seen that with Graham Mertz coming to Florida. A change of scenery was the right move for him. He got into a system that where he was allowed to show his talents off, and maybe that's the case for guys like Scooby Williams and Jadon Hill. Good guys. We wish them the best of luck. Obviously, we hope that we outplay them when they come to the Swamp on September the 14th. And in this game, I do think the Gators pull it out, and I think, like you said, the home field advantage once again. And the other thing we talked about is that win versus Miami, it really will help build momentum and build confidence in this team. All off season long, all we've heard about is how Billy Napier's on the hot seat. He's the coach on out there to be fired right now. Vegas gives him the highest odds to be the first coach fired in the 2024 season. 4.5 wins over under total by Vegas. The utter disrespect from everybody in the media in Vegas. But if you win that Miami game, it just shows that, you know what we're doing as a staff and as a team is working. And I think that could snowball and crescendo into something more. And I think the Gators do get it done against Texas A&M. And the other thing too, Texas A&M has a very difficult opening game versus Notre
Notre
Dame.
Dame.
And
Yep.
I would put that matchup as a much more difficult one than Miami for us. So
Yeah.
I do think they're going to be a little bit beat up from that game. Not to say we won't be versus Miami, but I like this game where it is in the schedule, like you said, and I think the Gators do get the job done. I do see this being another nail biter close game, similar to the Miami game. But the Gators, it sounds like we're saying start 3-0, just like Chris Doring also said, who was on our show last week.
This is the ultimate Jimmy's and Joe's X's and O's game, by the way, because I think Elko is 10 times the coach Billy Napier is on the field in the game. But Florida has the better Jimmy's and Joe's. The Florida Gators have the better team around the coaching staff. So,
Yeah.
I mean,
Maybe. I mean, Elko, I mean, you got to give Napier credit. Napier was a 40-win coach and a two-time conference champion at ULL. And Elko did some great things at Duke as well. I'm not going to take that away from him. But I think Elko's going to have to prove himself as a head coach in the SEC before you can really say he's a better coach than Napier.
well, I mean, I've
You
seen
know,
him draw up game plans with Riley Leonard at Duke that wound up giving them a 3 touchdown win over a far superior team in Clemson. So that, like, right there, if nothing else. And they were in the game against FSU, too, another
yeah.
team that had a lot more talent than they did. So I've seen
They would
his
have beat them if Leonard didn't go down in that game.
right. So I'm saying I've seen Mike
Yeah,
Elko coach his team to better results than their talent delta would make you think that they were capable of.
fair
So,
enough.
but again, Florida has the better team. We think Florida wins.
I agreed. Okay. First road game of the season, one of the true road games of the season. Florida only leaves the state of Florida 9 times. or I'm sorry, beg your pardon, 3 times. They're in the state of Florida 9 times. Mississippi State is one of them. They go on the road September 21st. It's a noon kickoff. That spot kind of freaks me out a little bit. Those noon kickoffs. It's going to be
Yeah.
11 Central Time over there. Historically, this has been kind of a spot where Florida gets a slow start on the road. Vanderbilt was that last time for us in 2022, and then of course Starkville. Neil, I know you've said it before, has been a house of horrors for this squad on a couple of different times. Florida has won the last 2 matchups going to Starkville though, and that was in 2018 with Dan Mullen, 13-6, and then 29-19 in 2000 when first came over.
Boy, were those games ugly, though.
They were. They always tend to be ugly in Starkville, and then they've been uglier in the past, 2004, 2000, 1992, all losses for the Gators. So, can the Gators make it 3 in a row against the Bulldogs?
Another game where I think that Florida is going to have the less good in-game coach, but the far, far superior football team. I think that Jeff Lebby, as a pure football brain, is leaps and bounds ahead of Billy Napier. And if Napier doesn't like that statement, he could go prove me wrong. He's more than welcome to do so. Simply what I've seen the last 2 years of him as a play caller, he's just not that great. But he does have the much better team. Jimmy's and Joe's again for Florida are just on a completely different level than Mississippi State, and Lebby has a massive rebuild project ahead of him. So, maybe he can scheme his way to a couple of nice touchdown drives here and there where there's some plays that maybe catch Florida off guard. Maybe he quote unquote saves something for Florida, but I don't see this being a game beyond the third quarter. I think the ultimate result is going to be Florida's talent is going to be way too much.
Yeah, I think it's a slow start for the Gators, but they turn it on in the second half and they pull away and win by about 2 touchdowns or more. Maybe like a 17-point win. That's what I'm going to say. But
Yeah,
I
I think so.
agree. Florida has more talent. They should just absolutely steamroll these guys. 17 returning starters versus an entirely new squad. I do agree. Jeff
Zero
Lebby,
returning starters on defense.
0 returning starters on defense. I know that was something that had tip Chris Phillips. He mentioned that on our show with
Oh
Allie.
yeah, that's right. He did. That's right.
I think that Jeff Lebby could be the next Dan Mullen of the conference in that he's a fantastic play caller. But on this day, in his first season, in his, I believe, fourth game as a head coach, it's not going to be his day. And the Gators, sounds like we're now saying, 4-0 start. And that takes us to the next Florida showdown versus the little brother school, the Central Florida Knights,
Golden
October,
Knights.
the Golden Knights, October 5th in the Swamp. This is going to be a primetime game. It's either 6 or 8 o'clock. ESPN has flexed that time. We don't know what time it'll kick off, but it's going to be electric and it'll be 90% Gator fans, UCF fans who may or may not be listening to the show. So, Neil, what do you think about this one? I think the Gators should handle business, but KJ Jefferson did show up in the Swamp last year and put a number on us.
Yeah, I'm one of those guys that typically doesn't believe in lightning striking twice. I don't think it happens again. Then again, Florida, I don't know. We said the defense couldn't be horrendous 2 years in a row under Billy Napier, and it was in 2022 and 2023. So, I don't think this is a game that Florida is going to necessarily cruise in, but I also don't think it's going to be a nail biter. I'm feeling like maybe a 31-20 type of win where you feel a little nervous for a quarter or two, but then you can clearly see the talent taking its toll in the third quarter. By the fourth quarter, I think it's by the time we're singing Tom Petty, I think we're all feeling good about this. Florida's probably going to have the lead and the ball and a chance to go down and deliver the kill shot. And I think that Florida is going to handle this one by, I think, what's the early spread? Like 14 or so? There was an early spread on this game.
I
I
haven't
think
seen that personally, but
I
I
think it
mean,
was 13 and a half or 14 or something. And I think it's right at that, right around that area. So semi comfortable Florida win.
yeah, no, I think we're on the same page once again here. The Gators have a nice home game at night against a team they definitely have more talent versus they need to beat this team. And I got to say, this is the game like we talked about. If things aren't going well in the season and you do lose to UCF, this is kind of the spot where maybe that trigger does get pulled on Billy Napier
If it's the
or the
second loss of the year, I think that could be the coup de grace.
yeah, and he won't if he's got 2 losses at this point, he's not gonna at 3-2, he's not gonna get fired at 3-2, but it could snowball from there because as we're about to talk about, you've got at Tennessee, homecoming versus Kentucky, a team you have not beat yet as head coach, then Georgia, then Texas, 2 top 5 teams. It could get out of control if you don't win this game. So If you do win this game and you go 5-0, then you set yourself up for potentially a really exciting second half of the season and finish, which I think is a good time now to segue into our next true home game or road game, Tennessee Volunteers, a place that the Gators have had their way ever since 2004. They've only lost two times in that time period in the last 20 years there. Can the Gators, because I do believe as of this point, the Gators are not going to be favored in this game. Tennessee, a top 15 team, Nico Imaliava, Josh Heupel, a good duo there. They showed out in the bowl game winning 35-0 against Iowa. We'll see if he can live up to that hype there for Tennessee. But this is a spot, Neil, where I think it's gonna be really difficult for the Gators to get a win.
The thing I'd point to is, yeah, Florida's had their way in this stadium for the last 2 decades. The last time they played there, and the only time they played there with these two current coaches at these respective schools, they lost. And I don't want to hear, well, they made a game of it late. They came back. Yeah, well, you lost. And frankly, you were
Yep.
down 3 scores and had to fight like hell just to even make it a game.
Made it respectable.
Shout out to Do One Black, by the way, for getting that onside kick. That was one of the more incredible plays I've seen in a long time that no one talks about. But you lost. And now, look, Florida, we believe, has a better football team than they did 2 years ago. I think that's pretty much agreed upon. Tennessee also has a much better team now than they did last year. So I think we'll see a much closer to the 2022 team than what we saw in 2023. Obviously, the quarterback drop off, losing Hendon Hooker, that's not really that easy to replace a guy like that. I mean, Nico is, I think, capable of doing some big things, but he hasn't yet. Hendon Hooker did have a year under his belt in that system before. Nico, I mean, yeah, he did, but he also didn't really play nearly as much as Hooker did in his first year in Knoxville. So I think this could be a sort of welcome to the SEC moment for him, or at least I would say that if this wasn't part of a big boy stretch for Tennessee football, go look at that schedule and who they play before and after Florida. It's not easy. I think Florida's going to go down in this one simply because Tennessee sees the schedule that's ahead of them. I think that they lose at least one, if not two, before this. And they say, this is a game we have to win, much like Florida is going to say with Miami. So I think Tennessee is going to get the job done at home.
Yeah, I think Gator fans have to come to the reality that Tennessee is a much better program now. They're a well-run program. Their NIL game is strong. Their
Mhm.
athletic department is serious about winning. Josh Heupel is a good coach. He is a master of X's and O's. And Nico Maliava may be the real deal. We don't know yet. So I think that this is not the Tennessee team of Derek Dooley or Butch Jones
Or
or Jeremy
Kiffin.
Pruitt or even Lane Kiffin. I mean, I do think Kiffin eventually might have got Tennessee back to where they needed to be if he had stayed long enough, but he didn't. And Florida has to get their act together, or Tennessee is going to start beating Florida more often than not when they do match up. And we are going to play them once again at home next season as the schedule does flip in 2025. But on this day, I do think Tennessee gets the better of Florida. I do think they are a better team. Talent wise, if you look at it, Florida is actually ahead of Tennessee on the talent composite. They've been recruiting better, but the way this is a team assembled in the image of Josh Heupel, and he just has an incredible system there right now. And they are also winning massive recruiting battles and getting those five-star recruits. They just landed David Sanders Jr., a five-star offensive tackle for the next cycle. Those are guys Florida's not getting, and at the most important position potentially in the SEC. So Tennessee, to me, is an upward trajectory program right now. And Florida right now, we don't know if they're going up or down, but Tennessee is. And I do think Tennessee right now is a better team than the Gators, and it's on the road. For we talked about how we think Florida's going to win Miami and Texas A&M because it's at home. Tennessee definitely, I think, is going to win this game because they're at home. So the Gators, this would be their first loss of the season. They would go to 5-1. Still an incredible start if that does happen. And it's not to say they can't recover a week later when they have homecoming versus the Kentucky Wildcats and Mark Stoops, a team that I think Billy Napier really needs to get a win against because now the Gators have lost three consecutive matchups with Kentucky. You're at homecoming. It's the week. It's also the matchup before the Georgia Bulldogs. And you just can't lose to this team again, Neil. Like Kentucky continues to get the better of us for no reason at all, other than that they're more physical than us. And we have more talent than them. We should beat this team. And with 17 returning starters, Graham Mertz back at the helm at quarterback, Gators got to get a win at home.
3 straight losses, and the beatings are getting worse.
Yeah.
because the first one of the three was a one-score game where Florida
It's
really
kind of fluky. It
controlled
was
it.
fluky. It was a very
Right,
fluky
the
game.
blocked field goal that gets taken back for a touchdown, and even then, still Florida still drives down inside their 10-yard line in the final minute. Year after that in the swamp, Richardson plays terribly. I mean, his words, not mine. He literally
Yeah.
said in the post-game presser, "I played terrible,"
And
and
we were
just
up by
handed them
9 in that game at one point.
up by 9, and we didn't score again. Like, we took the second half off. Now Dane Key did make a great play over Jalen Kimber. You got to just shake his hand and say, "Okay, great play, move on." But then last year they just blow our doors off, and that's one of those games where I look at the film and like 33-14 doesn't come close to describing how much of a beatdown that was. Barry and Brown drops a touchdown pass in the end zone for them. It could have been 40-14 if the guy catches a ball that is not contested for him. So just know that Florida, for all its talent, as we've seen in the past couple of years, obviously is no longer guaranteed to beat Kentucky anymore. But I think that stops. I think Florida is finally going to take Kentucky seriously, or if you think Florida did take them seriously the last couple of years and were just out physicaled in the trenches, okay, well then the trenches have to take this game seriously because yeah, the Gators are bigger and stronger and faster, but the tape just doesn't show that. The tape shows Kentucky dominating on both sides of the line of scrimmage. So I think this is a game where Florida's offensive line and defensive line are challenged by their respective coaches. I mean, Jonathan DeCoster coming over from the NFL, we're going to see if he can inject some, I guess, meanness into them. Especially after I do think Florida's offensive line will show some warts early in the year against a guy like a Ruben Bain, against maybe some of the guys from Texas A&M too. And I think they're going to come up mad and they're going to come out with a win in this one because simply, if you don't win this one, they may not win again the rest of the year. And I'm not giving anything away, but just look at that schedule. You look at this game, you know you have got to win it. Before we finish the show, got to shout out our sponsors. The All Kinds of Weather Forecast is proudly sponsored by 401k Generation, the wealth management company that helps you invest today for your future tomorrow. Their team of advisors is committed to providing guidance and education for your 401k plan and its participants, and they offer a range of enrollment solutions tailored to meet the unique needs of your company's 401k plan. Whether it's savings for your child's college, investment advice, or even your retirement, 401k Generation's team of advisors makes getting to know you their top priority. Their advisors will tailor a path to assist you in navigating life's financial milestones and reaching your financial goals. That's 401k Generation, building stronger futures, one generation at a time. For more information, please contact them at 866 998 5879 or visit their website at 401kgeneration.com.
Yeah, you have to win this game. This does get us to bowl eligibility if we're following the same track that we are right now. Neil and I have the Gators 5-1 going into this matchup. 6-1 would obviously clinch bowl eligibility and probably guarantee Billy Napier back in 2025. I think at that point, 6-1 start gets Billy Napier back, might even get him extended. And the Gators, I agree. I think that this is one that we do get. I would love to just see us exercise our demons and beat these guys to a pulp for all of the hell I feel like we've been put through against Kentucky. I mean, really, I don't remember the last time Florida, I think 2016 might have been the last one where I feel like we just dominated it from start to finish. Because like even in 2020, I know we won by 24 points, but the score doesn't really indicate how poorly Florida played that day. It was a Kadarius Toney punt return that gave us the lead at halftime. And we didn't let them score again, but Kentucky did drive on that defense several times, like a lot of teams did that year. I would just love an old-fashioned Florida beating of Kentucky, but I don't think it's going to happen this game. I do think it's a game Florida's going to have to grind out and win, but I think they do get the job done because they have more talent, and I think that these guys are going to not want to, especially the seniors who have now lost 3 times to them. I think they're not going to want to have that 0-4 mark against Kentucky. So the
I mean,
Gators
at
get it done.
some point, the talent's got to show up.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I agree. We say every dog has his day. Every Gator's going to have his day eventually too. So I think the Gators get it done here. 6-1 start for the Gators, as both Neil and I now have predicted. That takes us into our last 5 games. The vaunted gauntlet here, the Georgia Bulldogs. Neil,
Loss.
I don't think we need a lot of analysis on this. You and I both
Georgia's
gave
better.
Georgia's
Georgia's
better.
better at every single position, and I think this is one of maybe 2 or 3 games where Florida will not have the talent advantage at quarterback. Maybe you could say Quinn Ewers or maybe Jackson Dart would be better than Graham Mertz, but Georgia clearly with Carson Beck, one of the teams that is going to clearly have an advantage at every single spot in the field. I think Florida fights, but I don't see Florida pulling this out.
Same here. I agree. Be a great upset if it happened, but I don't think it happens this year. We're still a very long ways away from catching Georgia in talent. So the Gators now 6-2, go on the road to Texas. I think this is similar, unfortunately. I think
Yeah.
it's going to be kind of one of those you take on your lumps a little bit after a tough loss to Georgia. I have the Gators falling to Texas here to go to 6-3, Neil, and that's really just because Texas just has more talent. These two games we've just covered here quickly is the fact that they just out talent us on the field.
Yeah, I mean Florida isn't winning games when they do have a talent advantage, like against Arkansas or Kentucky or Vanderbilt in his first year, the near disaster against South Florida. And pardon the pun, because Texas is bull or cattle, whatever. I think Florida gets taken to the slaughterhouse in this one. I think this is a bad day to be a Gator. So yeah, it's not going to be pretty.
Yeah, well, hopefully the Gator fans just at least enjoy the trip out to Austin, and we'll see them here next year in the Swamp.
Much like FSU fans enjoyed that trip to Ireland.
Absolutely. All right. Now the Gators do return home, though, for the final two home games of the season. The first one against a team that they have not beaten since 2018, the LSU Tigers, who always seem to have gotten the better of us in the last 20 years. I think the Gators recover here, Neil. I think this is one where you look at these next two matchups, and I do see them on paper as kind of a toss-up game. But I think the Gators will get one of these two, and this is the one that I think they get because I don't think LSU is as talented as they are last year. I don't think Garrett Nussmeier is the quarterback like Jaden Daniels clearly, and I think the Gators finally get a win over LSU, a much overdue win against LSU, similar to Kentucky. And this is one where Florida, they've taken two bad losses in a row. They rise above it, they come back home, and they play really inspired football. And I think they get the win against them to go to 7-3.
Florida's taken 2 bad losses in a row in our projections. They've taken 5 bad losses in a row to LSU. Well, four really bad ones. They've taken 5 overall. I have PTSD from this one. This is shout out to my friend Casey. This is Casey ruled. I'm not picking Florida to beat LSU again until they actually do it because I've seen LSU scout team beat Florida 2 years in a row, and the next 2 years I've seen Florida single-handedly make LSU's quarterback the number 2 pick in the NFL draft. So I don't care if Garrett Nussmeier is hurt. I don't care if they're down to their scout team again. They've beaten us twice in the last 4 years with their scout team. So no, do it before I predict it.
All right. So Neil's got us now 6-4. I have us at 7-3. That's where we now go to Ole Miss, who's preseason top six. People are saying this is the best team Lane Kiffin's ever had as a head coach. I think this is a close game, but I think Jackson Dart is the better quarterback in this matchup, has a little bit more weapons around him. And Lane Kiffin is just a hell of a coach when it comes to X's and O's. I think he out calls us in this game. I think he has the better acumen, like you referred to earlier in the show, Neil. I got the Gators falling in this one to go to 7-4.
So when we talked about Texas A&M and M, and I asked if I could pick just a coin flip, and you said no, this is the other game I was referring to.
Ah,
I think Florida gets one of Texas A&M and Ole Miss. I picked Florida to beat Texas A&M simply because they get them earlier in the year. Ole Miss is less talented than Florida, but they do have, I think, at least at the very least, it's even. The quarterback battle is even. Jackson Dart and Graham Mertz are obviously very different types of quarterbacks, but I think in terms of overall production and how good they are at leading the team down the field, they're probably on par, if not a slight edge to Jackson Dart. But I mean, first of all, welcome back, Princely. Second, they've just amassed so much not only talent but experience in the portal. There's experienced talent. It's not just a bunch of 5-star freshmen. There's talent that they amassed that has proven itself to be talented on the field. So I think that this one goes Ole Miss's way, and I think the deciding factor is that, like you said, Lane Kiffin is a better in-game coach than Billy Napier.
all right. So now there's a two game, or no, just still a one game difference. 6-5 for you, Neil. I have the Gators at 7-4, and that takes us into the showdown with Florida State. And let me preface this. This was not my prediction after the fact, as at the time of this recording, Florida State is 0-1 now. I have the Gators beating Florida State. And I had told a lot of people going into this Georgia Tech game, the spread was 11 and a half. I said Tech was going to cover that spread. I didn't think they were going to win the game, but I said they were going to cover. And the reason being, Florida State's lost up to 70% of its returning production. You don't just lose 70% of your production and flip a switch and be the same team you were last year. You're not Alabama or Georgia. You're not bringing in the talent that they are. And no, you cannot fill it with the portal every single time. We've talked about that at nauseum here. High school recruiting is the lifeblood of your program. Transfer portal is supposed to plug needs and fill holes. You can't do that every single year through the transfer portal in the majority. And they've continued to do that. And I think it's showing up with them in that game that we just played. They just played. And I think it's going to show up this season for them. I have the Gators going on the road and getting a big win against the Noles. So I have the Gators finishing 8-4 and 4-4 in conference play. I think that the Gators, this would be a record that gets Florida back to respectability, gives us hope and a lot of momentum for the 2025 season with DJ Lagway taking over, gets us to a really respectable bowl game. I don't think it's enough to make the playoff, but 8-4, 4-4 season, Napier's extended and returns. And I think that the recruits, more importantly, will start coming aboard in the 2025 class.
I am not going to change my prediction based on what I saw today. I think FSU was horrid when I expected them to take the step back from a great team to just an average team. I refuse to believe they'll be that bad the whole year. I refuse to believe that both sides of the line of scrimmage are going to look that bad throughout the course of the year, that they won't get better. Worth pointing out, whatever weight you want to put on this, but their offensive line coach, Alex Atkins, was serving a suspension. How much of that, how much of an in-game advantage or disadvantage that really is, we can agree or disagree, but there's no way DJ is going to look that bad throwing the football all year. There's no way their defense is going to be pushed around like that all year. There's no way that their secondary is going to be that bad all year. I refuse to believe it until I see it play out more, and maybe it will, but just one game isn't going to change my opinion on that. And oh yeah, Billy Napier is 1-7 against his rivals. I'm not buying it. I think it's a close game, as the last two have been, but I'm going to use the past data to predict the future and say that that record isn't going to be helped by this game. So close game, but I think FSU wins.
So Neil 6-6. Chris, I think that's 3-5 conference record for you.
Yep.
My prediction 8-4, 4-4 overall, a little more optimistic, filling the bill of I'm the more positive, upbeat one. You are the more negative one. I do think your predictions are grounded in reality, though, and Florida very well could be 6-6. I mean, these are we have a lot of coin flippy games, and it could go either way. It really could. And I think to me, 8-4, 9-3 is the ceiling of this team. I think 3 to 4 wins is the bottom. So there's a big delta between what could be our best case and worst case scenario. But we'll have to see. I do think that this will be a much more exciting football season. And we are very excited to bring it to you here at the In All Kinds Weather Forecast. So please make sure that if you're not already, hit subscribe down below. Make sure to like this episode. Leave us a comment. What do you think the prediction for the Florida Gators will be? Neil says 6-6. I say 8-4. Let us know down below in the comments. And if you're not already listening to us on any of our audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, please subscribe, leave us a comment. 5-star review helps go a long way. So from all of us here at the In All Kinds Weather Forecast, thank you for listening to our game-by-game preview of the 2024 season. Go Gators, and it's game week, everybody. Let's get excited.